You know how people say you never really know your partner until everything goes sideways. I always thought that was just something bitter people said after a nasty breakup, a way to cope with the pain of being blindsided. Turns out, there's more truth to it than I ever imagined. My name is Mark, and I thought I had everything in my life figured out, especially when it came to my wife, Emily. We'd been together for 7 years, married for 5, and by all appearances, we had a solid life together. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Vermitting collège. Emily had this kind of energy about her, an effortless charm that could brighten up a room the second she walked in. People were naturally drawn to her, and I wasn't immune to it. She was magnetic, full of life, and when we started dating, I was convinced I had found the one. When we got married, it felt like the beginning of a perfect, happy life. For a while, we were young in love, and everything seemed like it was on the right path. I thought we were happy, that I was giving her everything she needed. But maybe that was the problem. I gave too much, and in doing so, I missed the signs. It started with little things, the kind of small changes that most people would brush off just like I did. At first, Emily was on her phone more often, texting late into the night. She told me it was just friends, nothing unusual, and I believed her because why wouldn't I? Then she started dressing differently, putting more effort into her appearance even on days when there wasn't any special occasion. I chalked it up to her just wanting to look good, which had always been part of her personality. But then came the nights out. She started going out more, always with vague excuses about meeting coworkers or running last-minute errands. She'd come home later and later, her mood oscillating between distant and oddly affectionate. It was as if I was living with two different people. But I didn't want to believe anything was wrong, didn't want to face the possibility that my wife, the woman I had promised to love forever, was betraying me. I should have trusted my gut. I should have paid more attention when she started working late, or when she became more secretive. But who wants to believe their spouse is cheating on them? No one wants to acknowledge that kind of pain, so I ignored it. I told myself it was all in my head, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was off. I just wasn't ready to confront it yet. Then came the night when everything changed. Emily told me she had another late meeting at work, the same excuse she'd used countless times before. But this time, something felt different. Maybe it was the way she barely looked at me when she said it, or how her eyes stayed glued to her phone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Call it intuition, or maybe just the accumulation of months of doubt, but I knew I had to do something. So, for the first time in my life, I decided to follow her. I waited about 10 minutes after she left, trying to keep my mind from spiraling into worst-case scenarios. I grabbed my keys and drove off into the night, my heart pounding in my chest. The whole way there, I kept telling myself I was being ridiculous, that I'd find her at the office and feel like an idiot for even suspecting her. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach. It didn't take long to find her. I spotted her car parked in a dimly lit lot on the outskirts of town. My heart sank when I saw another car already there, an old, beat-up thing that didn't seem like it belonged. I didn't recognize the car, but I recognized the man who stepped out of it. Chris. He was some guy she'd mentioned before, someone from work who loved to crack inappropriate jokes and act like the life of the party. She always brushed him off as harmless, just a guy who liked to make people laugh. But there was nothing harmless about what I was witnessing. Emily stepped out of her car, glancing around nervously like she was worried someone might see her. Then, without hesitation, she walked straight up to Chris. I could barely process what was happening before they were all over each other, right there in the parking lot, not even bothering to hide. It was surreal, watching my wife with another man in such a blatant, public display. I should have felt sick to my stomach, maybe even heartbroken, but instead, all I felt was a cold, hard anger settled deep in my chest. Part of me had known all along that she was capable of this. I had ignored the signs, buried the nagging feelings, because I didn't want to believe it. But now that I was seeing it with my own eyes, It was impossible to deny. They didn't even bother with discretion. They just jumped into Chris's car as if they had nothing to hide. I sat there in my own car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do. Should I confront them? Should I drive away and pretend I never saw anything? Maybe smash his car windows and leave before anyone noticed? Every option seemed inadequate. Yet I knew I had to do something or I was going to explode. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed a bat from the back seat and walked up to their car. They didn't notice me at first, too caught up in each other. But the second I smashed the butt of the bat against the window, they jumped apart. The sound of shattering glass echoed in the parking lot, and for a brief moment, I felt a grim satisfaction. Emily screamed, and Chris fumbled around, trying to cover himself. He was pathetic, scrambling in a panic, as if he hadn't just been caught in the act. I didn't give him a chance to speak. I yanked the car door open, grabbed him by the arm, and dragged him out completely naked and threw him onto the cold pavement. He started pleading, saying he didn't know she was married, that it was all a mistake. But his words meant nothing to me. All I could feel was the surge of adrenaline coursing through me. Without thinking, I swung the bat and hit him square in the face. I heard the crunch of his nose breaking before I saw the blood pour out. He collapsed onto the ground, clutching his face and moaning like the coward he was. Emily was still in the car, screaming for me to stop, but I didn't care. My focus had shifted from Chris to her. She was the one who had betrayed me. Chris wasn't the real problem. He was just a symptom of it. I turned and walked toward the car, and I could see the fear in her eyes as she realized there was no talking her way out of this. She rolled the window down just enough to speak, her voice shaky. "Mark, I can explain. This isn't what it looks like." I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound that felt foreign even to me. "It's exactly what it looks like, Emily," I said, my voice low and controlled. "You're a liar and a cheater. And guess what? I'm done." Her face went pale, and she started crying, babbling about how it was all a mistake, that it only happened once, that she didn't mean for any of this. For a brief moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost, but not enough to stop what was coming next. I stepped back, met her gaze, and said, "When you get home, all your stuff will be waiting for you on the lawn." I didn't wait for her to respond. I tossed the bat into the back seat of my car and drove off. As I pulled away, I could still hear her sobbing, but I didn't care. All I felt was a strange sense of relief, like a weight had been lifted from my chest. Finally, I had seen her for who she really was, and there was no going back. By the time I got home, the anger had given way to a calm, focused determination. I wasn't going to let her worm her way back into my life. Not after this. I went straight to the bedroom and started packing up her things. Clothes, shoes, makeup. It all went into suitcases and trash bags. I wasn't careful about it, either. I wanted her to know that I wasn't playing around. Her perfume bottles, the scent she wore when she came home late, went straight into the garbage. The satisfaction I felt tossing her makeup and hearing the compacts crack was almost therapeutic. Every item I threw out felt like I was clearing away the lies, the betrayal, and everything she had done to destroy our marriage. When I finished, I opened the window and started tossing her things onto the lawn. Suitcases, clothes, shoes, it all landed in a messy heap. I wanted her to see it, to know that this was what her life had become. As I threw the last bag out, I heard her car pulling into the driveway. I watched from the window as she stepped out, still wearing the dress she'd worn for him. Her eyes went wide when she saw the mess on the lawn, and for a moment, she just stood there stunned. Then she started screaming, begging to come inside, saying we needed to talk. But there was nothing left to say. I leaned out of the window, my voice steady as I told her, "You want it out, Emily?" Well, I had just watched Emily with some random guy in his car, and now she was standing before me, her face tense with frustration. She seemed to be struggling to make me believe whatever excuse she was about to come up with. Her voice was strained, desperate. Like she couldn't wrap her head around why I wasn't buying into her story this time. "It wasn't like that," she exclaimed, her eyes wide with panic. "It didn't mean anything, I swear. I love you, Mark. It was a mistake." There was a pleading edge to her voice, as though she thought she could convince me with enough emotion. But I had heard it all before. I wasn't going to let her weasel her way out of this one. I crossed my arms, shaking my head in disbelief. Funny how this mistake just so happened to involve getting naked with another guy in a parking lot. Quite the accident. Her tears started to fall again, sliding down her face in thick, ugly streaks. Once upon a time, those tears might have broken me. But now, all they did was solidify how done I was. I wasn't falling for the drama, not anymore. I had been through this cycle with her too many times. "Goodbye, Emily," I said, my voice cold and final. I wasn't shouting, but there was enough steel in my tone to make it clear I meant every word. When you're done packing up your stuff on the lawn, you can go crawl back to Chris. Maybe he'll let you play the victim for a while, but you're not stepping foot in this house again. Without waiting for her to respond, I slammed the window shut and walked away. I heard her pounding on the door, her frantic voice echoing through the walls. But I didn't care anymore. I went to the fridge, grabbed a beer, and sank into the couch. Her screams faded as she realized I wasn't coming to the door. I should have felt angrier, maybe sadder, but I didn't. Instead, I felt lighter, like a huge weight had just been lifted off me. Sure, it hurt to think about how our marriage had come to this, but as I watched her out the window, her tantrum unfolding on the lawn, surrounded by the mess she had created, I felt a strange satisfaction. She could cry, scream, and lie all she wanted. None of it mattered anymore. I was finally free. She didn't stop until she had packed her things into her car. I glanced out once or twice, seeing her sobbing as she gathered her belongings, stuffing them haphazardly into the trunk. Pathetic. I felt nothing, just cold indifference. I figured she'd try to reach out once she left. She always did. Emily had a habit of messing up, then coming back with her sweet words and tears, trying to worm her way back into my life. But this time, I blocked her number before she could even pull out of the driveway. I had no interest in hearing her excuses or apologies. The next few days were surprisingly quiet. I had expected her to show up again, banging on the door or sending one of our mutual friends to talk to me. But none of that happened. There was just silence. It felt strange, almost unnatural, but also like a breath of fresh air. I hadn't realized just how much chaos she had brought into my life until it was gone. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. My head hit the pillow without the weight of her drama dragging me down. It was the kind of peace I hadn't experienced in what felt like forever. Of course, I knew the quiet wouldn't last. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. The message was brief. "We need to talk. It's important. Emily." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the delete button. Part of me wanted nothing to do with her, to just erase her from my life. But another part of me, the part that was still curious, wondered what she could possibly want now. Against my better judgment, I replied, "What is it?" Her response came quickly. "I've been thinking. I want to fix this. I want to make things right between us. Can we meet and talk, please?" I nearly laughed out loud. She really thought that we could sit down and talk, like what she had done was just a little hiccup in our marriage. Like I would even entertain the idea of fixing things. But curiosity got the best of me again. Maybe I just wanted to see her try and fail one last time. I agreed to meet her, but I chose a public place, a coffee shop. I wasn't about to let her create another scene at my house. When I got there, she was already sitting at a corner table, her hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. She looked rough, dark circles under her eyes, hair messy and unkempt. For a brief moment, I almost felt bad for her. Almost. "Mark, I'm so glad you came," she said, her voice trembling. "I've been a wreck since that night. I know I messed up, but I love you." I was confused and I cut her off before she could finish. "Don't, Emily. Don't even try. My voice was calm, but there was no softness in it. You didn't look too confused when I found you with Chris. Her face paled at the mention of his name, but I didn't stop. You don't love me. If you did, you wouldn't have betrayed me the way you did. You would have respected me enough to keep your clothes on when you were with someone else. I was stupid, she said, her voice cracking. I thought something was missing in our marriage, and I thought maybe being with Chris would fill that gap. But I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Her tears began again, falling thick and fast, but they didn't move me. This was her pattern, her manipulation at its finest. I had seen it all before. You weren't confused, Emily, I said, leaning forward, my voice still calm but firm. You were selfish. You wanted more, and you didn't care who you hurt to get it. You didn't care about me. She was sobbing openly now, her hands reaching out across the table, pleading. Please, Mark, I can change. We can fix this. I'll go to therapy. We can work through it together. I'll do anything. I almost laughed at how predictable she was. Therapy, I repeated. After everything? No. It's too late for that. I'm done, Emily. I'm filing for divorce. She reached for my hand, her voice rising in desperation. No! Please don't throw everything away over one mistake. I pulled my hand back, looking at her with nothing but pity. You threw it away, Emily. The moment you cheated, this marriage was over. I stood up, ignoring her pleas, and walked out of the coffee shop. I didn't look back. As I made my way to the car, a strange sense of finality washed over me. This was the end. There would be no going back, no second chances. And for once, I was completely okay with that. In the days that followed, she tried reaching out again. Long, emotional emails, voicemails filled with apologies, even showing up at the house. But I didn't answer. I didn't respond. I had finally taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let her back in. The divorce process moved quickly. We didn't have kids, and there weren't any messy assets to split. Emily, for all her flaws, seemed to accept that there was no winning me back. By the time the papers were finalized, I was already packing up, ready to move out of the house that had been tainted with memories of our failed marriage. A few months later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went on a road trip. I packed up my car and just started driving, no real destination in mind. It was the most freeing thing I had done in a long time. No more Emily. No more drama. Just me, the open road, and endless possibilities. One night, lying under the stars at a random campsite in the middle of nowhere, I thought back on everything. The lies, the betrayal, the anger I had felt. And I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad, either. I was just at peace. Emily had hurt me, no doubt about it. But in the end, she had set me free. I didn't need her, and I didn't need to carry the weight of our broken marriage anymore. Would I trust someone again? Maybe. But for now, I was content being on my own, figuring out who I was without her. I had learned that you can't force someone to love or respect you. You can only control how you respond to their actions. And sometimes, walking away is the best thing you can do for yourself.